Wednesday, March 23rd. Believe it or not, it's almost April. Incredible. The year is going so fast. We're in the middle of March Madness, and I may say that my Jayhawks are looking fairly strong, the whole thing. But before we get rolling here, let's have some music from Dr. John Sibley.
Sometimes when the night goes to the day and I wake up down in this missing you kind of way, I remember things better left forgotten.
Beautiful.
Bravo, bravo.
Thank you, sir.
I'll tell you what, Johnny, let's stop the talk and you just play the guitar and sing for an hour.
I thought we were going to hear more.
It'll be
no problem.
successful.
That's no problem. You know, Llewelyn, is called talent.
Last time you were trying to show your superiority to me, it was called money.
Well, you know, I don't want to go there, but as they say, it is what it is. How y'all doing today?
I see you've come out of your corner strong this time, Johnny. It'll be so sad when you have to retreat.
I do understand.
Johnny, how are you? How's school? How's everything?
Well, there's a lot of conversations about the economy, a whole lot of conversation about inflation, not a lot of conversation about why there's inflation from the supply chain. Lots of conversation about what's happening in Russia. You know, at the university here, we have students from all over the world. So we do have students from Ukraine, and it is the uncertainty that's happening to their loved ones and their parents and their cousins. Then there's a conversation about what happened to them during spring break, which I find very, very interesting. Andreas, you know, it is the combination of the war going on, and you know, it's like, okay, the war is going on, but as long as I'm not in it, it's fine. And you know, I'm a Vietnam veteran, I understand that. You know, if it doesn't affect you, it's fine. But I have a tendency to think that what's going on in Europe and in that modern country and seeing it destroyed might have an impact on us, not only in terms of the economy, but in terms of migration. I'm working with people here in Austin. They've got 160 families coming to Central Texas to be entrepreneurs, moving from other countries. And then, of course, we're coming out of the pandemic, I think. So everything is trying to come back. So there are lots of discussions about world affairs here at the university, lots of discussions about what will the future look like. And through it all, the stock market seems to go up and down and continue to do great things. So it's a lot going on.
Absolutely, absolutely. Llewelyn, how are you, sir?
All is well here. We got some bad weather coming in. It's that weather you pushed up from Texas. It has Texas written all over it, bad weather.
On purpose.
All is well. Johnny is quite right. The world is in tumult. There are more questions than there are answers. Huge pressures are building. 3.5 million refugees will have to be homed somewhere. Some in this country, many in Europe. We are on the verge of a global food shortage if the Ukrainians don't start planting soon. We've always thought of the US as the breadbasket, and it is, but there's another breadbasket, and that is Ukraine. Egypt, for example, gets about 70% of its grain from Ukraine. Most of Africa depends on grain from Ukraine. It's not happening, or it's unlikely to happen. I was on with the Steve Odland of the conference board yesterday in a session, and he was very pessimistic in terms of he expected short-term best hope that inflation would stay at its high rate of 7-8% until 2024. But if anything went wrong, he said it would go on much longer. If productivity in the US declines, we will have stagflation, which some of us remember from late 70s, early 80s. where it was one of the most depressing times we went through, where it didn't seem that anything worked that would bring us out of it. So it's a very troubling time.
Absolutely, indeed. Well, we have a great guest today. His name is Duane Highley. I hope I'm saying that correctly.
You said it right.
And Duane,
Highly
how are
unlikely,
you?
sometimes they call me. Highly unlikely.
Where are you today, and how is the weather where you are?
I'm in Westminster, Colorado, so northwest Denver suburb, kind of towards Boulder, and weather's sunny today. Nice day. You might get to the 60s.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, for those of you listening and watching that don't know Duane Highley, Duane is the Chief Executive Officer of TTry-State Generation and Transmission Association. And it's as is known in the industry, a GNT that is actually owned, I believe, by 45 members in New Mexico, Colorado, Nebraska, and Wyoming, servicing over 5,700 miles of wires, oh my goodness, and over 1 million consumers. And one of the most perhaps difficult and treacherous territory in America. Duane, what an amazing challenge you have every day. And real quick, Duane, before having this amazing journey at TTry-State, which is a great story in the United States of electrification of those four states, he was the president and CEO of Arkansas Electric Cooperative Corp. And Arkansas Electric Cooperative Inc. and Senior VP of Power Production and Power Plant Manager at Associated Electric Cooperatives for over 18 years. He's been doing this in his sleep and in backstroking. He is one of those superheroes, one of those dumb, old utility guys like me.
That's exactly what I am.
That's
Yes.
right. And he has a BS in electric engineering and a Master's of Science in Engineering Management, both from the Missouri University of Science and Technology. And he has an Advanced Management Executive Program certificate from Harvard University. Welcome, Duane.
Thank you. Thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah. So, Duane, what are your thoughts on what's happening in the marketplace? We talked a lot about, in the past year about the impact of COVID in many ways, and clearly COVID has had a big impact on the load curve, the behavior of our customers. And I'm sure that you guys had to do many adjustments to that. One of the things that I always found fascinating being a utility guy is that, we shut down the country, but the utilities and the first responders never could shut down. And I never understood why people were told to shut down when you can't shut down. So tell us a little bit about that and some of the lessons learned, and how do you see 2022?
Well, so for us, I mean, COVID was a challenging time, and people that work at power plants or maintain transmission lines, there's no way for them to work from home. So that was just not possible. A lot of our office people work from home, and we made that work amazingly well. But the end result is that we got a loss of sales from where we used to be. A lot of loads went away during COVID and never came back. In our service area in particular, some of the oil and gas hasn't come back, even though prices are so high right now. And I think part of that is once they left, they just left. And there's a difficult regulatory environment in the West right now. In many of the states, it's hard to go back and drill. And so I don't know exactly what's in the mind of the oil and gas companies, but I know that we're down significantly in terms of sales. A lot of it driven by that. I'd say we were at about 10% down. We're now about 5% down still from where we were pre-pandemic. And that hurts when you're a heavily fixed cost business like this, and you're selling on volume, but you're really trying to cover mostly fixed costs. So if you're not having the sales, it's difficult. But I'd say despite that, our employees have really fought hard as we're in the middle of a kind of a remarkably fast green energy transition. And we're actually lowering our rates as we do this. So that's kind of a rarity. And I can't hardly say that as a utility executive. We always talk about rate increases and say rate reduction. It kind of doesn't roll off the tongue, but it's beautiful when it happens. So that's what we're doing.
Yeah, great. So Duane, we talked a lot about in this program about the digital transformation, digitalization, decentralization, decarbonization. We talk about the telecom innovations, what's going on with smart energy, obviously, smart cities, smart buildings. What are the top 3 things that are driving your strategy short term here that you're working on the next 24 months? You got AMI everywhere. You got a grid that is fairly smart. What else are you working on?
So we're making a very rapid energy transition because the states in which we serve have some of the strongest and most stringent green energy goals in the country. So as we stretch to get to 80% decarbonization in Colorado by the end of the decade, and we'll be 70% clean energy across all 4 of the states that we serve, 42 utility members, over 1 million consumers. So that means moving away from coal and into renewables very, very rapidly. So reliability, you said, what's a few things? Reliability is number 1. We got to keep the lights on, or like you saw last year in Texas, people will die. So we have to make this transition, preserve reliability, preserve affordability, and that is where we've scrubbed every dollar in this organization. We're actually reducing costs. Part of that's helped with what we call a green energy dividend. The low cost wind and solar beats the price of just about everything else we can generate with right now. So as we develop that, it helps lower. So it's reliable and it's affordable, and it's getting increasingly clean. Those are the 3 things we focus on as we do this with Ukraine and cybersecurity threats and Russia, all that. So, keep it all running.
Absolutely.
So Duane, this is John. You got to fix the airplane at 40,000 feet. You can't turn everything off. You can't land it. You got to fix it at 40,000 feet. And one of the things that we know as we move from the different forms of energy is that we have regulatory issues to deal with. Any entrepreneur, any company knows, from the tobacco company to the oil companies and to coal companies now. It seemed to me that when you said that we're going to go to clean energy by, I don't know, the next 10 years or whenever, it seemed to me that America could also change its regulatory stance over the years with the election of different kinds of politicians. And I think you are one of the most regulated industries that I have ever seen. Because the only regulation that we want is when I turn my lights on, they come on. So my question is, how do you plan for the uncertainty of policy that's developed by different political frameworks? Because I can see that the next administration might say, well, coal is fine.
Yeah.
Or might say that, well, why are you messing around with the nuclear, right? They might. So how do you plan for that? It's almost like being a member of a school board and saying, what books will we read? I mean, how do you plan for that uncertainty and the political realities of your business?
Well, John, you've really nailed it, because one of the greatest risks we face isn't whether it's not cost escalation, it's pen risk, what we call pen risk, that some regulatory official or legislator could, with the stroke of a pen, enact a new regulation that changes our world. And you've seen it. We had in Colorado a law that required 80% decarbonization by 2030. That meant all the coal had to close in the state. So within 10 years, we have to make a complete pivot from a coal-dependent grid to an almost completely renewable grid. Same thing's happening in New Mexico right now. And then you have that tension because of the lack of a federal policy on energy in terms of renewables. Wyoming, as a separate state and another state that we serve, has a different view on energy. Try to maintain jobs in fossil fuels. And so that's a tension for us. And the only way we can find common ground is to say, can we keep it reliable? Can we keep it affordable? And so we focus on that. And I think we found a way to thread the needle to reliability, but it doesn't help at all when you have one president come in office and say, we're going to go this way, and the next president comes in and says, we're turn around and go 180 degrees the other way. And all we can do is just maintain flexibility and a very diverse portfolio. So as long as we have, not all our eggs in one basket, but we develop diversity, because it's what Yogi Berra used to say, making predictions is hard, especially if they're about the future. And so as we look at that, we have no idea really where the future is going to drive us and what's going to be possible. And I mean, only within general bounds, right? But if we have a little bit of everything in our energy supply portfolio. That's how we protect ourselves from those unexpected risks.
Well, let me follow that up in terms of regional competition with business enterprises. Let's say that the state of Texas would say, that we have all the energy that we need. We understand that dinosaurs are clean energy, so therefore oil is clean energy. So we just need to redefine.
Solar energy, yeah.
Redefine everything. So dinosaurs ate trees, and then petroleum comes from dinosaurs, then that represents clean energy. But seriously, how does it relate to your competition for business enterprise and for the security of business enterprise? That is, we do know, whatever it is, that one form has really, really been very, very dependent. We know that oil and gas or coal has been very, very dependent. So when you meet with your state regulators, are there any talk about, well, Texas is doing this, California is doing this, New York is doing this, and we have to get in step because we want enterprises to come here, you know, and to make sure that they come here, of course, they need electricity. Do you guys ever talk about inter-competition, regional competition?
Absolutely. Yeah, and you'll get a phone call from the governor's office saying, how come you can't cut a deal for this data center? Because we want to see them here versus somewhere else. Or aluminum smelter, you know, when I worked more in the Midwest, there'd be competition for where's that aluminum smelter going to land? Or where's that steel recycler going to land? And you know, literally the governors call the utility guys and say, I need you to do us a favor for me here.
Yeah.
That you can only go so far. I mean, we're a cost-driven business, and you got to cover your cost. You know, if the energy consumer can be flexible in how they use the energy, or if they can pool some storage or some renewables with it, it might help us manage their cost better. But it's, you know, and if they can have controllable loads where we can say on the peak you can turn it down, oh, that saves tons of money. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Duane, we started the broadcast with Johnny talking about the effects of the Ukrainian war, the Russian invasion. What are going to be the effects on the utilities? Russia, for example, is a major exporter of nickel, the largest single supplier of nickel in the world, a supplier of palladium, some rare earths, not that many. The price of gas has gone up, which is a pressure utilities will feel. But as we go to this new world of green energy, we're also going to need more nickel, more of these metals used either on the electric side or in the consumer side in the batteries, both in electric storage and in electric vehicles. Seems to me there's a crunch, and that we're going to have to do what we've always done quite brilliantly after some dislocation, come up with new technologies or new materials. I always think of synthetic rubber when natural rubber clearly couldn't do the job. But in the short term, what dislocations do you expect from the Russian sanctions / war?
Yeah, and serious supply chain disruptions are just beginning to be seen. As you mentioned, the rare earth materials, for example. And we already had a supply chain problem with renewables, in part because of China and deliveries and port clogged up ports. So we're already having difficulty getting some of these renewable projects built in time. So the state has rules, you know, they want to see a glide path, a reduction in carbon emissions over time. And to get that done, we have committed to several gigawatts of new wind and solar installations in our service area. But they're already being delayed because they can't get the materials delivered, and it's going to get worse as those rare earths flow through the supply chain, and that shortage means that the manufacturing will be curtailed. When you think about storage batteries and the need for lithium in that whole process, one of the things utilities are exploring, it won't help us short term, but you know, the iron air battery, we don't need lightweight batteries that are, you know, good for transportation in the utility business. We just needed something to store a whole heck of a lot of energy, and to make this green energy transition, we don't just need a 4-hour battery or a 6-hour battery like you can kind of buy today, maybe cost effectively. We need a 4 or 5 day battery, and that's a lot of energy. So the iron air technology is one to watch because we have a lot of iron. We don't have to rely on Ukraine for iron. And while it's a very heavy battery, it makes sense for stationary service like you know, storing energy for power production.
What
Well,
is the state of development of iron air? Back in the 70s and 80s, I looked at every possible kind of battery development. I particularly remember aluminum air. I don't remember iron air, but aluminum air, which looked promising and presumably was lighter, but nothing came of it. And along came lithium, which happily Russia is not a major supplier. The major suppliers, I think, are in South America. There's a triangle of countries down there, and Australia, and that helps a lot. I also hear there are new technology for producing lithium from nature that may be less environmentally damaging, which is good news in a time of a lot of very bad news. But all of these things are going to have an effect in the utility space as you drive madly for a green future. It may be delayed. And storage and air batteries, as you mentioned, which I think is very significant if they're effective, if they're developed. But what is your interim storage? Is natural gas a reasonable interim storage technology? And can you store it by overpressurizing the system, for example?
Well, you know, the providers, the pipeline companies can, and they do already pack the line because, you know, for the energy sector, our peak in the winter is going to occur in the morning as people are getting up, turning everything on. So they can pack the lines overnight, and they already take advantage of that to get as much delivery as they can to the load, you know, LDC customers, the cities, and the electric providers. So I think we've kind of managed that as tight as we can get it, and we're already at the edge of reliability with that. But you know, natural gas is the solution for us until we can get a better long-term storage technology. We're going to be relying on gas-based plants to fill in those gaps on those weeks, those periods when the sun isn't shining or the wind isn't blowing. We need something that we can push a button and see it run. I think it's going to be mid next decade before we have the really significant energy storages options available to us.
Yeah. So Duane, you mentioned that you have unfortunately lost quite a bit of commercial and industrial load, perhaps, primarily due to the oil and gas shift and strategy in this country, unfortunately. I am curious, what do you see and what's happening in those 4 states around the edge of the grid? Obviously, you don't manage your members' grids. I suspect that many of them are getting better at demand response and trying to figure out how they get there on a two-way power flow grid that can manage distributed energy resources. But is vehicle electrification happening in your states? Are solar rooftops happening in your states? Is there a new shift, perhaps, of new, different load, different demand that is making you think differently? How about you sort of respond to the needs of your members?
That is absolutely happening. And especially, you know, in our service territory in the West, we have a fantastic solar resource, high elevation, lots of sunshine, very few cloudy days. That's perfect for solar. So some of the lowest cost solar comes from our areas in New Mexico, Wyoming, Colorado, and Western Nebraska. But, you know, we're exploring microgrid options for our members that are saving money where, for example, mountain community, a place called Red Feather Lakes, served by a radial transmission line. In other words, it's off the main grid and you have many, many miles going through the mountains of just a single line to serve this community. And anytime anything happens on that line, the whole village goes out. Right. Now, what we've done there is partner with one of our member cooperatives and build a battery system with solar and then a backup propane generator as well. And what happens is, when those outages occur on that line, it immediately goes to the batteries that have stored solar energy, and that'll run as long as that can run. And after several hours, if the outage is continuing, it'll fall back to the propane. But what it means is they don't have their lights going out all the time. And this is a little village in the mountains where everybody goes, you know, kind of a service center for them. There's a general store, you know, and a library, and they can get their internet access. So it's a pretty essential service. But that microgrid keeps it reliable, and it's a lot cheaper than building another power line from the other side of the mountain. And you think of what that would mean in terms of environmental impact and the duration of getting the thing built and how much it would cost. So it turns out to be a beautiful solution for our members. And then you mentioned vehicle to grid, or the ability to to take a electric vehicle and use it. Well, the perfect example of that is a school bus. And so in La Plata Electric in Durango, Colorado, they have now partnered with us and put in an electric school bus that has bi-directional flow capability. So, you know, a school bus is almost like the perfect electrical load. You can charge it up overnight. In the morning, it has a very defined route. You know just how much energy you have to put in it. Goes and makes its route with the students, comes back. You can charge it again, make your afternoon route with the students, and then wait until the right time at night, because you know you just have to have it full the next day. So if in the middle of the day, when we're having a peak, we say, my gosh, you know, we just lost a power plant, what can we do? Well, if we had fleets of these buses all over and you could push the button and bring that energy back in, it's like a power plant for you. Right. And it's one that we're saving money for the school system. Maintenance and operations costs of an electric bus are so much smaller than a diesel bus. And then they can help us as well.
Right.
You know, Duane, what I found interesting about the industry, and you know, if you read Andre Carvallo's book, he said that we all started on micro grids anyway, and then we just put them all together. So there's nothing
That's
new.
exactly right. Well, I mean, when the people say, why don't we go to microgrids? I say, let's do a little thought experiment.
Yeah, that's right. It seems to me, Duane, that what's interesting about your industry is that everybody talks about it's got to be cheap and affordable. You got all of these new technologies coming on that's going to change the business model, or should change the business model of how things are delivered. So how do you balance the fact that in most industries, when new technologies come aboard, you know, things do go up. You know, they go up. You know, I paid $475 for my first HP calculator. It didn't mean standard deviations, cosine, and that's all.
I think I had one of those.
Yeah, you did. So my question is, look at all of the technology. How do you keep the quote cheapness for the consumer, affordability there, and at the same time want to embrace the new technology, which has to have an investment cost for the industry, and this would be for all the co-ops. It seems to me that this idea that it might just go up, the energy might go up, has delayed the adoption of new technologies that could be very, very useful for the delivery of energy in what I call the third energy revolution, if you might.
Yeah. Well, you know, when you look at the cost to your household for energy.
And keep mine the same. I don't care about anybody else. I want mine cheap.
Yeah, I know.
Llewelyn's, you can charge him $3 or $4.
I'm going to raise Llewelyn's rates.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yours don't go up. How's that? But
just keep it on. Years ago, when I lived in Washington, I went down to some big utility meeting where the chairman of Pepco was the chairman and thanked me, and they gave me a handsome fee for speaking. I got back to my apartment and the lights were out. So I called the manager and I said, what's wrong? The lights are out, the building manager. And he said, you haven't paid. I said, it's impossible they'll be out. I know the chairman of Pepco. And he said, sure you do. Pay the bill. Anyway.
So I'm curious, Duane. I mean, GNTs have a great transparency among the ecosystem. Do you guys band together and kind of try to deploy similar technologies across and aggregate buying power or things like that?
Well, I mean, the whole purpose of a GNT is to work for, you know, typically our member cooperatives. We serve member cooperatives and we also serve public power districts in Nebraska that are similarly structured. Yeah. And so it's all nonprofit power. But co-ops tend to serve very small service areas like a county or something, a rural county. And they just can't get the scale on their own to have low cost energy. And they could buy from an investor-owned utility, but they just be one customer. So now they band together and form the GNT to give them that purchasing power. But at this point, you know, the GNTs have gotten to a scale where we can actually deploy competitively priced large-scale projects. For example, like one of our large-scale renewable projects, we've just deployed 1,000 megawatts of wind and solar. Average cost of all that is less than 2 cents a kilowatt hour. But if you build a small solar farm in a village, that's going to be 4.5 cents a kilowatt hour. Right. So, you know, there's scale economies that are really significant, even in renewable energy development. And that's what we do. Now, you know, as GNTs, the problem is that every region of the country has different resource availability. You know, some places wind is great, some places it's not. So what we're really working on to band things together is what we call RTO, a Regional Transmission Organization. Now, the Eastern United States, is all connected with these things that basically are the air traffic controllers of the grid. They make sure you can integrate large amounts of renewables and find the very lowest cost generation every minute to serve load. In fact, every 5 seconds they're redispatching. And we don't have that in the West. So today in the West, that grid runs kind of the same way the Eastern grid ran in the 1980s. I mean, we literally have people on the telephone from our utility calling our neighboring utility saying, hey, I got some surplus energy, you want to buy something? And we were on a trading floor. But you look at the Eastern United States, that's all electronic. The computers are conducting an online auction, so to speak, every 5 seconds and redeploying where's the cheapest power going to come from. And that's what we need in the West. And once we get that, then we can even have a dream of bringing a greater interconnection east to west and be able to move that wind that's trapped in Kansas. Sometimes, you know, it's priced negative because you can't get rid of it, moving that west, and then taking some of that great solar resource we have in the West and moving it east. And when you move solar across time zones, you eliminate this problem they call the duck curve.
Yep.
You know, when the sun sets and all your load's coming in, well, the sun may set in Missouri, but the sun hasn't set in Colorado yet. So we can move that Colorado energy to Missouri. It's going to have greater value.
Right.
You know, Duane, we talked about that, you know, in the sense that maybe computers, I mean, the grid is where computers were 60 years ago, when some people were doing loaders 1, 2, 3, and other people were doing other kind of things. Now,
Quattro Pro, my friend.
Right here in Austin.
There you go, Portland.
Do you think that we could connect the grids, which of course bring hacking, as we've talked about here on this program, into play? But I've always said that if we could do that on a nationwide basis, then and let the computers tell where things should go, just like when we fly. So at one time, Llewelyn flew a plane. Now he just gets on it. You know what I call a pilot now? A passenger. I call a pilot a passenger. So do you think we'll ever get to the point where we could connect everything together? And we've talked about it so many times on this program, so that we would have the software to really make the decisions about where energy goes.
Absolutely. I think it's technically possible. The computer system necessary to balance the grid across a bigger region than what's happening now is absolutely there. You know, Eastern grid in the United States has 6 major RTOs. That could be one. You know, you could use that one computer system, balance the entire Eastern grid as one solution. It's just the power of the computers has progressed to the point where that is a possible, feasible thing to do. And the same in the Western grid, we could have one. And then the question is, how do you tie those together, or do you tie Texas? I don't think Texas ever wants to be part of that, so they'll stay independent. You know, they can secede from the union at any time and all that business. But
watch it.
We can either increase the density of the DC ties that exist now, which they need to be upgraded, or we could even look at trying to do a synchronous tie across the grid with normal AC lines. That's being studied, and it's a possibility.
Yeah, Duane, Elon Musk talks a lot about the fact that if we took a corner of Colorado, you know, 100 square miles, 1,000 square miles, and put it with solar, that we could, through transmission lines, 1,000 kVA, you know, power the whole country. What's your thought of that? And the fact that TTry-State could actually be one of those companies exporting energy to the whole country.
I say, hey, Elon, give me a call. Let's talk. Because I think the San Luis Valley is where he wants to go. I don't think he wants to be in Eastern Colorado. I think he wants to be in mid-South Colorado. But let's talk, Elon. Bring your checkbook.
Obviously, Elon knows a lot about math, but he sometimes gets it wrong. In one speech, he said that more power could be generated from the site of a nuclear power plant with solar cells than could possibly be generated by that plant. And this was a factor of about 1,000 wrong.
Yeah, I think you put the decimal point in the wrong spot.
Yeah, he got that one wrong. So just check the math when you do the deal. What can we do with the meter? Andres was one of the people who made a smart grid out of the Austin power and knows a lot about meters. But have we yet touched the surface of what the meter can do as a control device, as a source of economy, and as a source of bringing in power, say from a two-way flow out of an electric vehicle? Have we reached the limits of the development of the meter?
Well, I don't think we've reached the limits of what we can do with the meter, because one of the greatest value of the meters right now is the information that can come from the meter. Now we got to bridge the privacy question, right? You don't want to be, but you can tell a lot if you could get that second by second consumption data, or even millisecond consumption data. You can tell pretty much exactly what's going on behind that meter. Now that's what people are worried about, right? So how do you anonymize that? Because it helps us plan the grid better, know where the opportunities are for deploying advanced beneficial electrification. So, converting from propane to electric, or whatever we're looking at doing there to help meet decarbonization goals, and knowing where the opportunity is exactly and how we can best deploy it in the most cost-effective way. That information that's in your meter, it has a tremendous value. And I think that is being tapped to some limited extent, but there's a lot more potential there.
We've often talked about that and data, the value of data on this program, and of course run up into the privacy issue. You don't want, when your neighbor comes over, if you're taking a shower together, you don't want everybody to know it necessarily.
Yeah, some people do.
Oh, well, you're a bit of an exhibitionist, Duane.
Your Instagram account may tell you.
How are you doing? How are you doing with data miners and other huge consumers? They're moving into Texas at a great rate and putting some strain on the systems unless they're interrupted or if they sign contracts. The other thing that Texas has seen is these big sort of publicly minded, at least in their own minds, companies like Google come in and buy up the entire production, say from a solar farm or from a wind farm, which is not really advantageous to the small utilities around that still have to deliver the power. It turns them into common carriers rather than traditional rural. How do you face that? How are you dealing with it? And are you happy with it?
I'm pretty happy with it. It's an interesting model. The crypto miners are coming in pretty heavy, and figuring out which ones are real and which ones aren't maybe is a little bit of a challenge. And probably going to ask you to pay in advance if you want to connect, because they bring in, the tractor trailer loads of servers, and they can just hook it up and be online, but that thing can move to another state just as quick as it moved to your state. So, getting that coordination with what facilities need to be built. But the beautiful thing about it is a very controllable load. In some instances, they can go all the way off with their own backup. In other instances, they can go maybe from 100 megawatts to 20 when the utility says we need it. So that means no demand charge, and so just all they have to pay is really our margin above incremental energy. And so that can be very good cost for the crypto miner or the data center if they can come off. Crypto mining obviously can, data center maybe can't. But if they, again, partner with their own storage, or we help them with storage, there's an opportunity there.
Yeah.
Well,
Johnny, give me a second. I noticed as a point of interest that crypto miners tend to be into lifestyle. They move to pleasant parts of the country where there's good hunting and fishing. You don't see them crowding into Baltimore, for example. I just know. Sorry, Johnny, go ahead.
Well, let me finish.
You are a sociologist, Johnny.
We talked about smart meters and getting us out of the home, and we know that great companies have hired the best grid people in the world. Google has done so, and other people have done so. We know that the electric car guy that has come to Austin and providing great opportunities has also done so. How do you see the entry of great corporations? So therefore, if you look at Tesla, he has applied to be a provider of electricity for consumers here in the state of Texas. Yeah. So how do you view that competition?
Well, it is.
So Elon Musk, he's gonna buy the electricity wholesale and sell it to me retail, because he's in my house. Everybody's got electric cars. So how do you see that competition come along?
Well, it's different in the different parts of the industry, and co-ops are not vertically integrated. So that's kind of an interesting model. We got the distribution companies are separate from the transmission company and the generation company. So if you're a distribution company, that's not a horrible threat, right? Your wires are still going to be used to deliver the energy and actually to move those renewables from the households back into the grid. If you're a generation company, that can be a bit of a threat. Although, you know, if you're Musk and you're just buying somebody else's power and moving it, then okay, we're in that business like anybody else. We'll sell you the power. But it's, if you have customers that are buying power from you, that's a problem where, you know, retail competition can result in difficulty, I think, in getting investment where it needs to be. So everything's just a, you know, short-term profit construction. And this has always been a long-term business. You got to have steel in the ground. That's the only way you have reliability. And there's always been an opportunity for independent marketers to come in and buy some of that surplus short-term and resell it. But in the end of the day, you've got to have actual steel in the ground, whether it's solar and wind or whether it's fossil production or what have you, or we don't have reliability, and that takes decades. I mean, if we want to start building a plant today, we might be lucky to get it done in 4 years. It's probably more like 6.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're in a market like that, that's a real-time competitive market, there's not a lot of incentive to invest that $1 billion when you're competing with everybody else that's just trying to undercut you. And so there's the regulated utility model. There's, you know, the idea that you're paying a fixed rate, but it's covering some fixed costs, so that provides the cash flow to make those investments. And so one of the threats is, if it's complete competition and you don't recognize any kind of incentive for building something, you can get into a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Real quick, Duane, I have a couple of big questions and love to get your feedback. So clearly automation and all this sophistication requires 2 things: lots of great software, and we won't touch that one, plenty of choices on that, including artificial intelligence and machine learning and how that helps the business. But telecommunications, do you feel that you or do you see innovation? Do you have fiber to everything, to every substation? Do you see 5G as the next thing? Are you thinking about building your private network that is broadband, wireless? How do we evolve to real-time controls of the whole thing? And by the way, you are the GNT, which means that you could be building an entire canopy for all the members.
That's right. Well, so again, it's a little bit different co-op by co-op, because we work for our members, you know, they don't work for us.
Mm-hmm.
And so if they have the interest, and in some places across the country, there's definitely been a strong interest where they want to bring fiber to the home, every one of their households.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, you look at the rural areas of America and they're drying up. Some places it had been hard to sell a home. If you know, a young person drives into the neighborhood and looks at their cell phone, if there's no coverage,
Mm-hmm.
they don't even want to buy the house. And now that's such an indispensable part of our economy.
Mm-hmm.
So those communities that have the high-speed fiber-type broadband are the ones that are growing. But what's really interesting is the low Earth orbit satellites that are going to provide an opportunity that you don't have to have a fiber hookup, low latency, high speed. I think that's a game changer. And it could, I mean, for us, we want to deploy VPNs out there in our substations, and that gives us a much lower cost way to get that than building fiber. Now, most of our transmission in the high voltage system is hooked up with fiber type connections, broadband into those substations. But as you get into the lower voltages and the more remote areas, that's not necessarily there today. We'll definitely benefit from having that higher fidelity information coming from those substations, allow us to control things better.
Yeah. So this question that I'm asking, your answer dovetails into something that is happening in the United States aggressively. You know, we are John and I are partners in CMG Consulting. We do smart cities, smart utility roadmaps, and this smart cities are emerging. All these little municipalities that ultimately are the customers of your co-ops are in the need of transformation. They need smart streetlights and, you know, connectivity and smart meters and smart parking and X, Y, and Z. Are your customers, is your ecosystem coming to you and saying, we need help, we don't know how to pay for this?
Not so much for that, but in some cases, you look at the most remote rural areas, and that co-op may have a very tiny staff, right? So they may not be experts. There's some large co-ops and they can take care of this fine. They don't need us, right? But the smaller ones, I'm thinking of Garland Electric, extreme northwest Wyoming. I mean, it serves in the Wind River Mountains, you know, near Yellowstone, and they have about 3,000 meters that they're serving up there. So it's not a big co-op. and 7 employees. You know, it's kind of a miracle they keep the lights on. That, you know, half of those are, more than half of those are linemen, you know, to keep things going. But they don't have a full-time cyber expert or that can help build a smart city in Garland, you know, up in Cody, Wyoming. So that is where we can help them, because as a GNT, we have a huge IT staff. And so we can have those experts that work for them. And that is actually a new business development for us. So thank you for asking. And we don't even have the name for this subsidiary yet. In a few weeks, we're going to have it. Just ask us again, and we're going to be offering that to our members.
Yeah, so we have predicted a long time, Duane, now that it will be electric utilities that will be summoned by the masses to come to save the day about this digital divide that is emerging, you know, lack of broadband, lack of access to the internet. It's only going to get worse with electrification of vehicles and all that. And we believe that, you know, the GNTs, the big, you know, vertically integrated, the co-ops that are large, they have the infrastructure to help the city get their act together is the only way to do it. You know, you were built for this. You can borrow money easily. You know how to deploy it. You got all the infrastructure. What are your thoughts?
Oh, you nailed it. And what we have with the scale is the ability to borrow money at extremely attractive rates. We know how to build big systems, and networks are what we specialize in, right? So fiber networks is just another network. It's a lot of common skill set there. And the need to keep something maintained operating 24/7. We've been doing that for a lot of decades. So there's a complementary skill set. I do think we're well positioned to be in that space.
Good.
Duane, how much responsibility as an association you take for the cybersecurity of your members?
Well, again, that varies. And you know, for the smaller members, like I described, they're not going to have a full-time IT person, and we can provide them those services, or they can get them from a third party. But you know, what's happening in the electric grid right now, it's going to be more internal than external. This isn't just your normal outsourcing of some cybersecurity filtering for your grid. We're talking about real-time operating systems that need special responses to the digital threat. And of course, we're on high alert right now because of the Ukraine invasion and the fact that, as you heard the president say, they think the electric grid is specifically being targeted by Russia. Now, to put some of you at ease, the electric grid is also, of the 16 critical infrastructures under DHS, it was the first one to ever have mandatory and enforceable and auditable cybersecurity standards. So we have to prove we're ready for attack. And I think we're as prepared as anyone. You know, financial services sector has some regulations. We're hoping to see some mandatory regulations on the gas network. They're not there yet, but we need to make sure all those parts of the supply chain are protected, because we are under attack by nation states. I mean, we're the front line now of international warfare, you know, the critical utilities of the United States. And so we need, and I'll just say we are partnered with the federal government. I serve as the co-chair of the Electric Subsector Coordinating Council. We work with our federal counterparts at the cabinet level into DHS and DOE with NSA help and FBI and all that. And we do share classified threat briefing information into the utility sector. We have people who have partnered with the government. They hold security clearances so they can have those conversations. And so I'd say we're as prepared as we can be, but we can always get better.
Absolutely. Let me concur with that real quick. When I was with Austin Energy from 2003 to 2010, I witnessed a significant transformation as we built the first smart grid in the U.S. and buttoned down all the cybersecurity. When I joined Austin Energy, we were getting roughly 25,000 cyber attacks per month into our firewalls and all that stuff. 25,000. When I left in 2010, it was 10 million. I don't know what it is today, but it's
is.
That. It's like that.
That number might be 25,000 per hour right now.
Right.
And you know, you have people in China who get up in the morning and they go to work, and their job all day is to attack the critical infrastructure of the United States. That's their job.
Yeah.
So we've got to be good. You know, we've got to repel every one of their attacks, and they only have to get one right to get in the door.
Yeah.
I think
as
you're
a
right.
layman, as somebody without Andre's deep knowledge, or even Johnny Butler's deep knowledge. Did you hear me say that, Johnny?
I did. I'm shocked.
Without that deep knowledge,
I don't know why my heart skipped a beat.
there is some feeling, some late feeling that maybe the smaller utilities are more vulnerable and that it will be a way in to the whole grid. Is that a justified fear or not?
It's a justified fear for me. I mean, you know, the investor-owned utilities, what do you got, 100 or so big ones? And when you come to co-ops, you've got almost 900 cooperatives, many of them very small. And many of those aren't going to have a full-blown mega IT department. I believe Russia would like to get onto those networks just as much as anybody else and wreak havoc. And then you get in the municipal sector, and you got a couple thousand municipals across the country. And then you think about rural water systems or community water systems and what that threat that poses. So we got a lot of work to do.
Water utilities.
Well, Duane, let me put my distinguished Yankee colleague in perspective as we go forward here. I think what he's saying is all of a sudden your industry has been thrust into the forefront of technology, especially given the whiteout that we had in Texas. You know, Andre would tell you that we thought ERCOT was something you put in the refrigerator in the 80s. Now everybody knows about it. And I think for the first time, it has become political. There are a lot of scientists that's talking about technology where it can never happen again. And I think for the very, very first time, people said, you know what, maybe the lights can go out. And we have all of the scientists now geared toward you. As you said, as I wrote speeches for a president, and we used to say, Mr. President, Washington, D.C. is a place that's built to tear you down. So I think you're right. People come out and talk about and have discussions about. So I think that you are in a position that you've never been in before. I think that when you go to parties now, people want to speak to you rather than people who produce the Coca-Colas. And I think the scientific community is trying to figure things out, just like we figured out, you know, wireless, just like we figured out the combustion engine and winning Nobel Prizes for, you know, for batteries. So how do you accept this new situation here in your industry where all of a sudden I want to speak to Duane about what the hell is going on, and he has to have answers for me. Now, a lot of industries, the car industry had to do that. We went through the Volkswagen, we went through cars blowing up, and scientists always say, we can fix that. And now people are saying to your industry, we can fix that.
Yeah, we're getting maybe a little more help than we wanted from people who, you know, everybody all of a sudden is an expert in utility business and has an idea on how, a brand new idea on how the grid should run. And, you know, reliability has always been job one, and reliability means you change things slowly and you make sure, absolutely damn sure it works before you make the change. But, you know, when I was a young engineer, and this was a long time ago in the 80s, and I used to think, I'd read the Wall Street Journal every day, there wouldn't be a single article about electric energy. And I'd be like, you know, I wish at least once we could read about ourselves in the Wall Street Journal. And now it's every dang day.
It reminds me of when a plane crashed.
We weren't in there so much.
We want to know why. We want to know why the plane crashed. We want to do an in-depth analysis, and we want to improve on it. And the airline industry has done a great job, a wonderful job in safety, right? And I think the same thing is happening to your industry now. We had the whiteout here in Texas. Everything went out. People want to know, why did it go out? What were the elements? What were the engineering flaws? And it's still all over town. You would think that the Longhorns had won the national championship, which is kind of far.
I guarantee we're not that interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, Llewelyn, I love the Yankees. Thank you for the Civil War. I appreciate it. But let me get back to Duane. So, Duane, how do you think about those kind of issues? I mean, you're the industry now. You got, as Andre said, we got EVs coming in. We got all kind of trucks coming in, all kind of buses coming in, and we cannot operate without electricity. And we know that we have the technology to make it better.
Well, you know, we're really not that smart. We just fake it, and like everybody else. And it's a holy miracle that the lights come on when you flip a switch. I mean, I used to run a power plant. I couldn't believe it actually worked. Very complex, but somehow, you know, we make it work. Kind of make it look easy every once in a while. And But you know, you look at this and you always think everybody else is smarter than you, and then you realize once you're in that position and you say, well, I guess we'll just figure it out. That's what we're doing. We're just figuring it out. I
Yeah.
don't want to
Duane,
make it sound like we don't have a plan, but we're you know, we're
I
just figuring it out.
I still can't get used to flight and television. The
Duane,
one
I
thing-
want to tell you, I had the same feeling when I was flying small airplanes. When it started down the runway, I did not believe it would go into the air. And amazingly, it did. After which, it all seemed quite logical to me. One of the things that I've sort of often been interested in, at a time when a sort of cliche, often repeated wise saying is, look outside the box. And my inclination is to look inside the box and see what hasn't been used there. I wonder in the electric context, what we can do inside the box. And I can give you some examples of inside the box. The Sony Walkman was an inside the box.
Oh, yeah.
Lots of really good inventions have not required this huge research. It's simply trying something different. Or the doctor who changed leukemia cancer in children down at St. Jude's by saying, hey, we're giving these kids these poisons sequentially and they're dying anyway. There's a 4% survival rate. He said, let's give them all at once. And my God, now they have a 90% or 95% survival rate. And the world of medicine was changed. We got the cocktail, but it was inside the box. Nothing new was invented.
Yeah.
Can you apply that to electricity? What do you see in the box? And I think a little hint you once gave me, which is how we store hydrogen.
Well, okay, so there's the hydrogen thing. You know, when we look at, we need long-term storage. We need days of storage to decarbonize the grid and get off fossil fuels. And so that's going to mean something that can be stored and easily. So I think the conversation you and I had, Llewelyn, was about hydrogen converting to ammonia, and the fact that, you know, it's hard to store hydrogen. We can make hydrogen. We don't know for sure if it's going to be cost effective, but we think that's one of the possible solutions. Make lots of hydrogen with solar energy and then store it. And then when you need it, you burn it in a power plant. You can burn it in various different ways. But it's hard to store large amounts of hydrogen cost effectively. But if you convert it to ammonia, you add nitrogen, now you got ammonia, and there's more molecules of hydrogen in a gallon of ammonia than there is in a gallon of liquid hydrogen, if that makes any sense. And so then you can put that in pipelines and easily ship it, which is harder to move hydrogen in a pipeline, right? And that could be a way of moving energy around the country that's a completely non-carbon fuel cycle. The other thing, though, I'd say when you say, well, what's inside the box is looking at our own load and getting that information from the smart meters and understanding better how we can partner with our customers to manage their electrical consumption to create a virtual power plant. And you look at FERC Order 2222 talks about distribution aggregation. I think that's one of the great frontiers for us right now.
Totally agree. I really think that Duane, that you know, it's really fascinating to hear about you all in the journey. I wanna share real quick my screen. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanna thank real quick the sponsors for the show today, and remind everybody that our 2022 edition of the Digital 360 Summit is coming up September 6th through the 9th. Duane, we would love to have you. We will circle back on that. These are the companies that came and spoke and sponsored last year. We're looking forward to having a even bigger number of companies. And then I want to remind everybody of the work that we're doing at Texas State University with the CIEDAR Consortium. We're building 9 smart living labs, utilities and energy and many other things. And then I want to thank Texas State for sponsoring our show today. I really think that hopefully I stop broadcasting again. That this hour went too fast. I personally have always loved the Tri-State GNT reality. I've been very well aware of it, and there was a CIO that worked there. There was a friend of mine. I forget his name now, but he retired. And I think that geography and I think the GNTs are sort of are going to be called to become more than just energy stewards, and also become digital divide and telecommunication stewards for all that infrastructure that is going to be needed to transform America and keep up with the competition. The competition is a tremendous. Tell us one last thing, Duane. How are you dealing with workforce? Are you having challenges? Is everybody retiring? How are you replacing these people?
There was a pretty good wave of retirement, and right now it's just more of a competition, especially for those folks that have options to work 100% from home. We're trying to maintain at least 50% in office for those people that have the option, because we find an enormous value of collaboration, real collaboration, face to face. You just can't substitute it. And even the employees that were out for like a year and came back have many said, wow, this is like high fidelity. We went literally from 2 dimensions to 3 dimensions, and you can get so much more done more quickly in terms of agreement and working with each other. So it's been a struggle for us through the pandemic. I'm grateful that we're coming back together now, but we're just going to go to kind of a permanent 50% work from home. We recognize there's value to that too, and manage it that way.
Excellent. Gentlemen, final thoughts?
Well, I think that Duane should be advised that the high point of the annual Digital 360 is a sumo wrestling match between John Butler and myself.
And you don't want to miss this, Duane.
Okay. I wouldn't imagine I would want to miss such a thing.
And let me tell you, that is quite an image. But it's always good.
I shudder to think.
I like wearing the little thongs.
That's one of those things once seen you can't unsee.
It is quite a sight. It's quite a
I want
sight.
to call it to the Springer Show.
Thank you for being with us today. We
Yes.
Thank you for the phenomenal job that you do every day. You've been very humble for being a superstar and having really built a significant chunk of the United States grid. Thank you very much.
Oh, I'm happy to be here.
Wonderful to have you, Duane. Really great.
Yes, you got wonderful business model, a great future. The only thing you can do is look at the technology and get better with your business models.
I got to get the horn out and play with you on your guitar. That's the next thing.
Oh, I'm telling you, let's do it.
Yeah.
And we are actually going to do a little John Butler and the band at Digital 360 Summit.
That would be great.
So whoever plays is welcome to bring their instrument to jam on stage.
Okay, that's a commitment.
Good.
We're doing it. Johnny, take us away.
Okay, all right. You had not fallen, and I would never have found you. An angel flying too close to the ground. And I patched up your broken wing, and I hung around a while, trying to keep your spirits up and your fever down. But I knew someday that you would fly away. For love's the greatest healer to be found. So leave me if you need to, and I will always remember an angel flying too close to the ground.
All right.
Bravo.
Thank you, John. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.